World building, a practice that most writers go through. From the works of Tolkien to, yes, even Spyro. This is something that is needed. And focusing on Spyro, we see there is world building, yet not a whole lot. Which begs the question, should the next Spyro game have a heavier emphasis on world building? Greetings historians, welcome to Lore of the Dragon. World building is something that Spyro has delved into before, with a few instances standing out, mainly Spyro 2, 3, and The Legend of Spyro. These games affect the world in a great many ways and bring history from outside of the game's story, and are used as a backdrop for the story, giving your actions more weight in the world. Long story short, what I mean is events, large events, specifically that happen outside of the story. Perhaps the main example of Spyro world building that many will think of is The Legend of Spyro. There is an emphasis on things outside of the main story, and as well many moving parts to the world, such as the Purple Dragons or the Purple Dragon prophecy itself. To paraphrase a video I watched on the subject, this essentially creates a metaphorical mist to the world, where we are tricked into thinking there is more to it than there actually is. There are names mentioned in parts of the games, there are implications of a much larger dragon presence in the past, and more. In contrast, Spyro 2 and 3 have a simpler, but still somewhat effective style of world building. Spyro 2, I would say, has a better focus on the world outside of the dragons, as it takes place in a land where they aren't the dominant species. There are wars between the various races of this land, known as Avalar, which, while Spyro was there, he eventually stopped. An example of this is the war between Breeze Harbor and Zephyr. Orbs are used to generate magic, and power portals similar to that of the ones in the Dragon Realms. Spyro 3 takes a focus again on the dragons like Spyro 1. Various characters point out that the land once had magic, but once the dragons mysteriously disappeared, the magic drained away some 1,000 years before. Only when Spyro came back did the magic of the land begin to return. It also gives hints to the dragons' history, of how they were exiled from their home for angering an individual known as the Sorceress, and that they are exiles from a foreign land. Both types of world building leave room for questions, such as who wrote the Purple Dragon prophecy, and why didn't the dragons go back to their homeland, respectively. The styles of these two, of course, differ. The original trilogy wove its world building directly into the plot. In fact, most of the things in the actual story was just the major world building we got. The Legend of Spyro, on the other hand, took a different approach, adding art that, when looked at, can be used to explain ideas about the world in more subtle ways than the original trilogy. Both, however, have their fans, and both have their benefits, and personally, I honestly do like them both. However, beyond those questions, there's nothing but fan speculation. There was an attempt to remedy this in Shadow Legacy, a Spyro handheld game, and the last in the original continuity, debatably, by telling us what year events happened in the Dragon Realms and also telling us about myths of how the dragons got there. But beyond that, any of the major installments haven't put more focus on world building. This begs the question, why? And to answer that simply, Spyro wasn't exactly meant to be a story-heavy game. This, however, was not the case for The Legend of Spyro, which, while it had a continuous plot, budget and time constraints really just hampered the ability of the team to world build. But it was able to be archived in some areas of the internet. When the Reignited trilogy came out, the nature of it being a remaster of the original trilogy would have hampered the chances of its developers to world build. However, through the environments, such as architecture and additions to abilities, it seems like there was a heavier emphasis on making these worlds feel bigger than they were. However, in the story, this still wasn't seen, obviously because its job was to be a remaster of the original series. There was nothing in the story to back up what the architecture really symbolized, or the reason why Spyro glowed and had different markings on his body when he used certain power-up gates. And for what it was, it seemed to do just fine. It remastered the original trilogy, story, and all. However, left a lot of questions as to what things exactly were. Now, proceeding past the Reignited trilogy and looking to a new game, this once again begs the question: should the next Spyro game have a heavier emphasis on world building? Does it really need it? I honestly see more time world building giving the next Spyro game more longevity in the community, particularly through fan creations, fan theories, and talking about those things in places such as YouTube. The Legend of Spyro is a good example of this, as there is enough to speculate about, at least to piece together some parts of the story that might not have been in the games. Because of this, comics, fan art, and even theories are still coming out all these years later after The Legend of Spyro ended. This can be expanded upon by books perhaps, maybe some small stories that are put in the game, or world building can be mostly environmental like the Reignited trilogy. Honestly, it's fair game. It could also give people an emotional connection to the world. And I mean people mainly just getting into it, those who didn't grow up with the original games. There could be worlds or stories that people can relate to, maybe even more so than they can to Spyro or his journey. As well, it could allow the creativity of the developers to really shine through, with little details the community could uncover and discuss verbatim. There are actually aspects of this in the story of Spyro 2, although not as deep as what I'm trying to say here. Now, my only worry is that focusing on more aspects regarding world building could feel thematically confusing if the next game follows up the original or Reignited trilogy. If it is an entirely new series, or a Legend of Spyro remaster or follow-up, this might not apply as much. If in the case it is following up the Reignited trilogy and they want to stick with the same style, I do worry that adding more world-building aspects will essentially slow down the story or feel like they're misplaced. This could detract from the adventure, especially if it doesn't affect the plot. One of my solutions would be a collectible in-game that one could read, separate from the main story, but still present for those who want to read them. Another suggestion of mine would sort of be to emulate Spyro 2. Have dialogue options for NPCs where you could ask about the world instead of them just standing there, and also have subplots between certain worlds. This gives NPCs another reason to be and stay in the game. Or maybe you can just limit this to having important characters say this information. An example of this, I guess, would be talking to Hunter and learning about his observations about the world you're in, or something like that. Maybe include other NPCs from this new adventure, who, instead of just telling you about the loose threads that connect to the story, they could tell you about their home and perhaps something about their lives. To set the scene, maybe you're roaming around a place like Artisans and see the banners with the paintbrushes. When talking to an NPC like a dragon, they might bring up the topic about the banner, detailing in some way what the actual meaning of the banner is and maybe its origin. Or there's always books. Like anyone's actually going to buy a Spyro book, am I right? Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you all around. Anyway, a big thank you to my Patreons, Abyssa Blue, ConquerFan91, Jabby Kiasushin, Lack of312, Lawsy, Nightmare Spyro, and Shaggy. I'll see you all the next time we talk. Stay safe, historians.